Hello and welcome to Quick Start to Coding with Swift. Please may I introduce my co-host, Matt. Matt Hanlon is a long-time software developer, coach, teacher and dad in Ireland.
Thanks, Steve. And may I introduce Steve Bunce, an author, teacher, associate lecturer, and dad in the northeast of England.
Thanks, Matt. We have an exciting session for you today. Today, you are going to code your own camera. Imagine that, putting together all the component parts of a camera using Swift code. And it really works. So you're going to think about a dance and the parts of a dance which could go together, and then think about making your own camera. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to our exciting session this morning. Today we're thinking about building a camera. So what can we do on our Unplugged session which is about building and putting things together? Well, our theme this week has been dancing. So, what are the important parts of a dance? Well, we have music and then we have our dance moves. So I'd like you to start thinking now about your best dance moves. Okay, so if we come up with our best dance moves, then we could give them each a number and then we could select them and put them all together to make the world's best dance. Okay? Or we could add some random element to it. So if you think of your best dance moves, then maybe we could use a spinner or dice to select those moves and the order you do them. Let's see what happens, shall we? So this morning, if you want, you can go and find some dice and you can roll the dice and pick out a number, and that could be the number for your best dance move. So as an example, maybe if you rolled a 6, it would be a move from banana, banana, meatball. So maybe it would be the banana. If you rolled a 5, it could be left arm, banana. And if you rolled a 4, it could be meatball. Okay, that's what we're thinking about. But maybe you've got way better moves than I know. So let's make a spinner to get started. If you want, use dice. If you want, go and find some spinners or other things as well. But I'm going to show you just a little idea here using some paper how to make a spinner to pick our numbers. Okay. Let's get started. So here I have some paper, a pen, and you can see I've been practicing making some spinners already. There's a spinner which has got some different dance moves on. So for example, arms up, arms out wide. And this one, I've just got some numbers on. Now I made these out of card and paper, and it was quite hard to fold the card. So what I'm going to recommend to you today is let's use just some A4 plain paper. Now you can either use 2 sheets of paper, okay, and make your spinner from those 2 sheets, or if you want, you can tear one in half, and that's what I'm going to do now. So here is my piece of paper. I'm going to fold it in half, okay, as precisely as I can, and then I'm going to use the edge of the table just to tear it in half. Okay, so I'll get my piece of paper, hold it on the edge of the table and tear. What do you think? Okay, scissors might have been better. Right, now with this I'm going to fold it in half and half again. And with this one, I'm going to do the same. Half and half again. There we go. Fold the corner down from the top left, sorry. Fold it down like that And you can do the same on this one. So you can see we've got a repeat, or you could say a function here, where we're using the same instructions over and over. So there you go, look at that. So we've got two little trapeziums, I guess. Now, if we put this one on top of that one, can you see? Like that. We can cross them over. And then I'm going to fold this one. Okay, so I'm going to line that up with the edge there. I'm going to fold this one over so it matches the edge here. Now this is where I find it's quite tricky, because we'd like to go all the way across to the corner there, but actually, can you see it's not quite folded in there. Now there are other ways of making these spinners where you can actually make them more precise. What I was looking for was a quick way for us to make one this morning. Okay, so again with this one I'll fold it and fold it in as far as I can there and press it down. Okay, so there we go. You can see we've got two pointy ones and two which aren't quite pointy. So let's hide those not pointy ones. I'll fold this one in. In it comes. Oops. There we go. Oops. Go on. Fold it in to there. And then I shall turn it around. The next one, I can fold it in like that. And the next one, I can fold it in too. It's really quite stiff, the paper now, so you have to be quite firm as you're pushing the paper down. And then finally, here's our last one. And we're going to tuck this one under that flap. Okay, so it's quite difficult if you try folding it over. And get this, you have to then feed that under there, so it's not very easy, but I'm sure you can give it a good go. Lift that up and fold it in. Okay, like that. Now there we go. What do you think? There's our square. I'm going to fold it in half and half again, and there it is. There is my spinner. So now, like I did on here, I could either draw some shapes that I'm going to do, some dance moves, or you could put numbers on, or whatever you like. So I could just do the numbers again there. Look, I could go 1, 2, 3, 4. And now, when I spin it, the number facing me is a 4, so I'm going to add dance move number 4 to my dance. So there you go. We've made a spinner, and now we have that so we can pick random numbers. But now we need to think of those dance moves. So number 1 could simply be holding your arms up in the air. Number 2 could be nod your head. You decide, okay? So maybe on your own or with your partner, write down some names of different dance moves you'd like to do. Now I haven't got enough room here to go and work out my dance moves, so I think I'm going to need, you guessed it, my dancing shirt, and I'm going to go and practice some different dance moves so I can choose my favourite. Okay? I shall see you in a moment. Well, that was tremendous fun, wasn't it? How many dance moves have you managed to think of? Well, you can put those all together into your dance. Okay, so now you have thought of your dance moves, and now you have maybe used your spinner to select the dance moves. What should we do next? Well, Matt is going to help us put together our camera using the Swift Playgrounds, and then you could use your camera which you build to take some photographs of your different dance moves. So here, if we look at my iPad, I have the camera ready in the Swift Playgrounds. And here we are. Now you can see me on my camera, and I'm ready to take a picture using the camera I've built in Swift Playgrounds. How exciting. So off you go, take some pictures of your dance moves, put together your random numbers, and see if you can make the best dance ever. Well, Jimu and I have had fun. I look forward to seeing your dances. Keep dancing!
Thanks, Steve. All right, so what we're going to talk about today is a huge step up in our coding experience. So far, we've learned a little bit about loops, we've learned about functions, we've learned how to dance with those, we've learned about commands. Today, we're going to take a look at a much bigger picture. We're going to look a little bit at app design. Now, the code that we're about to see is way more complicated, way more intricate, and it has a lot more features that maybe we haven't been introduced to yet. That's okay though. That happens all the time for coders. We see unfamiliar looking code and we have to kind of go in and learn how to read it. So that's what we're going to work on today. We're going to work on our ability to just have a look at some code, not panic, and try to figure out what it's doing based on that code. So to do that, we're going to go open up Swift Playgrounds and we're going to play with one of my personal favorite playgrounds, Lights Camera Code. So if you don't have that already, you're going to go down to the See All button by More Playgrounds. It's in the Learn to Code section, and it's called Lights Camera Code. You're going to tap on that Get button to download that playground. I already have it, so I'm just going to open up my copy. And when we open it up, it looks very like the other playgrounds we've opened up. So it looks like Learn to Code 1. And it gives us a little introduction to what it is we're going to be looking at. And in this case, we're learning how to build a camera app, a fully functional one. And it tells us where we start from there. So cameras are things that let us capture the special moments in our lives. But as coders, we have to step back and think about what components we have there. We have a camera, we have somewhere we're going to display the image, and then we have somewhere where we're going to capture the image. So we've started to think about all the different steps a user is going to take when they want to use a camera app. And then ultimately, we want to interact with other apps on the iPad, like the Photos app. We want to be able to save our photo to that Photos application because that's what people expect when you have a camera app. And then we also want to be able to do other things like decorate the photos and interact with them a little bit more. We want to go beyond just moving someone around a maze and just making something dance. We want to actually figure out how a user is actually going to interact with the code that we write. So let's get started. So now we see a little bit of a difference. Whereas before we've had our instructions over here in the editor area, now we just have a bunch of code. And this is something you would see when you're working with a real app. You'd see just a screen full of code, a screen full of text. We have the first line here. We have some lines here that say there are 2 slashes and it says create the space. And then below here, here's a line of code that, well, we can only assume based on the comment that it's creating a space, whatever that is. And we'll find out what that is in a second. And then we have some other comments like create the component, add the component to the space, and start the camera. This is a really good practice when you're a coder, is to leave comments for yourself. Because Swift doesn't mind, it doesn't care what the comments look like. If you have those 2 slashes at the front of a line, Swift says, you know what, I'm going to ignore everything that comes after these slashes, And they're really for you as the coder. Or maybe your friend, if you say, actually, can you work on my app for me? You can leave comments there so that they know what you're doing. Or even your future self, when you come back to your code the next day, sometimes you've forgotten what it was you were working on, and you need those comments to give you a little bit of a hint to get back in the swing of things. So with this playground, our instructions are over here in our live view, where before we had Byte walking around the scene. So there are dots at the bottom, so it tells us that we can swipe through. So we're going to learn a little bit about app creation and design today. And it tells us right off, so we're going to create the components. And it tells us that components are the building blocks we'll use to create our camera app. If we tap on that blue text, it tells us that a component's just a building block. For example, here we're going to use a Swifty camera, we're going to use an image view, and we're going to use a button. So they're all elements that are going to show up on the screen for the user that they can interact with. So I can scroll in these boxes here and it'll give me a little bit more instructions. And it tells us that we're going to start by creating an instance of Swifty camera named camera. So these little different font words here, those are just telling us that those are the code names that we're going to have to know. So there's a type called Swifty camera, and there's something else called a camera that we're going to use. So here we actually have our example. I really like this playground because it gives you the code that you need to write to implement the features. And then we can kind of go back and inspect them, play around with them, break things. Because if we break things, remember, we can always reset the page and we're in good shape. So here we can either write, drag and drop, or copy and paste the following code below this comment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press and hold on this gray box and then drag it over here. So if I press and hold, I can drag it over here. I want to put it underneath the comment. So I can see that blue cursor is underneath the comment. That would be fine. If I miss and accidentally put it at the end of the line, you can see that my code becomes part of the comment and Swift just ignores it. That's why it's in that dull gray look. So if you make a mistake like that, you can easily undo it. You can either hit the reset page button by going up here to the three dots and resetting the page, or you can go down here and use the undo or redo arrow. So I'm going to use undo, and that'll just get rid of the thing that I accidentally dropped there. So I'm going to try it again. I'm going to tap and hold on this box, and we're going to drop it under that comment. And so now we have this new line of code. It says, all right, well, if above we created a component called space, here it looks like we're creating a component called Swifty camera. And it's got some extra stuff on the inside. It looks a little bit like a function because it's got those the parentheses. So maybe we kind of have an idea that maybe that'll run some code somewhere because it looks a bit like a function. If we want to find out more about what's a space, what's a Swifty camera, we can expand these sections and it'll tell us a little bit more about instances and spaces. Now the space is actually just this rectangle here that we're going to draw elements into, other components into. We can tap on Swifty camera and learn a little bit more like that. And then it tells us about code comments too. So there's a lot more material here for you to read through. Just like we're going to read the code over here, we can also, they've given us a lot of hints and a lot of documentation, which is great. You don't always get that as a coder. So now that we've created our camera, let's drag to the next page. So now it says add the camera. So after creating the camera component, we'll need to add it to the space. So if I hit run my code now with the code that I have written, it'll say lights camera code would like to access the camera. I'll say yes, because it wouldn't be very interesting if we didn't. And I just get a blank, kind of boring rectangle. If I tap on this bar in the middle and drag over to expand my live view, I can see that it's not hiding anywhere. I just don't have a camera. So if we collapse this by tapping on that arrow, and I'm going to hit the stop button, the instructions come back out, and it tells me I need to add this camera to the space. And we're going to do that using this fairly complicated looking line. And it tells us that we're going to drag, drop, or copy and paste the following code below this comment. Add the component to this space. So again, I'm going to press and hold and drag it over, trying not to add it after a comment again. So if we have a read of this and we treat it like an English language sentence, it kind of makes sense. So it says space dot add. So there's a function on the space called add, and we're adding a camera is the next part, followed by a comma, and then it says at, and then there's a point given. Now the space is organized like a grid. So we have in the very middle of the screen is 0, 0. So 0 on the x coordinate and y is also 0. Now, hopefully you've dealt with grids a little bit. If you haven't, we talk about that a little bit in another page. So you'll kind of see how we lay out our items. That's what we talk about a lot. We use this kind of point system and then size to determine how big the element's going to be to have it show up on the screen. So there's a little note about how to change the position of the camera. And this is where it talks about the X and Y coordinates. So even if you're not that familiar with it, or maybe you've forgotten about X and Y coordinates, just having a scan of this can kind of help you. And then if you really want to try it out, you can go over here and tap on the numbers and change it to see what certain coordinates will show up like on the screen. So let's try running our code to see what it looks like. All right, so there we are in the middle of the screen. If we expand it, it shows up right in the middle because we specified 0, 0. Let's go back and change that just to shift it a little bit. So if we say instead of 0, I'm gonna change that to, let's say 100 and run my code. I only changed the X coordinate. So you'll see that it didn't move up or down at all, because if I had changed the Y coordinate, it would. But it moved over this way, more towards the right, because I had changed the X coordinate to a positive number. If I changed it to negative 100, it would have moved it over to the left side. Okay, so I'm going to hit stop. So that's how our camera looks on screen. But it's not very exciting unless we start the camera. So you may have tried tapping on the button for the camera and it didn't do anything. There's nothing showing up in that little rectangle. It's kind of the world's most boring camera. That's because we need to start it first. So it says to right, drag or drop this code below start the camera. So I'm actually going to type this one. If I tap down there, you can see I get other items in my autocomplete bar. I'm going to tap camera dot start. And let's run our code. Okay, it's looking at the ceiling. There, it's looking at my face. Okay, I can hit this button. The screen flashes like it took a picture. I can hit this button here. And that flips it around and we're looking at the surface of the desk and a cable. All right, so it's looking pretty good. This is all right. We have a camera with these few lines of code. Now someone wrote a lot of lines of code to make this all work. But with these few lines of code, we were able to get a camera, a working one, up and running pretty quick. So let's swipe to the next set of instructions. So now it's telling us we can experiment with different camera styles. So this thing here is called a parameter. And it's something that we can pass to a function that will let the function do different things depending on the different parameters passed in. Now, functions were a big step up from just using other people's commands. Functions were ones where we wrote our own commands that other people could call by grouping certain steps together, like tie my shoes and loop, swoop, and pull. Now, by giving people parameters to pass in, we can give people alternatives to do something. Maybe there's a different way to tie your shoes, so we could specify an alternate style. So if we tap on plain here, we'll actually get some other options down here. So we can change it, and you note here, it's very important to leave the dot in front of all these words. So dot plane, dot shark, dot kitty, dot rocket, or dot cloud. Well, let's pick dot rocket, and let's try running our code now. Okay, we get a very different look for our camera now. We've got a star is our shutter button. We've got this over here is our flip button. Not too bad. Maybe I'm not a big fan of that one though. Maybe we'll switch it to the shark and run our code. Now this is really powerful because someone's written a bit of code that'll take a parameter that lets us change the entire look and feel of our camera, where the buttons are and everything. That's pretty cool. So let's hit stop. Hopefully you are going to experiment with that a little bit yourself. And feel free to pick any one of those options. And now we have a little quiz. So you're going to answer this question. So what is a component after all of that? Is a component a function that you call to add things to a space? Is it a building block, such as a space or a camera used in building an app? Or is a component a line of code that starts with 2 backslashes? What do you think it is? Now, if you don't know, we did see it earlier in the session, so you can swipe back through our other instructions to go find it. But we'll be using components a lot, so it's very important to understand what they are. How are you making out? Did you get it yet? All right. Well, let's pick it's a building block and confirm. That's right. We got it right. Excellent. We're ready to move on to the next page. So we're going to tap on this next page link. And this is all about seeing your photos. Now, if we go up here, we can see that we have quite a few other chapters. So this is going to be the last page we'll be able to work on today, but there's lots more to work through, and then they'll give you some follow-ons after that. So if you're really advanced, you can feel free to skip along and try to get as far as you can. Now that we have our space, we're going to try to create our components and see the photo that we've taken. All we can see now is when we press that shutter button, we see a white flash on the screen. That's not very exciting. We want to make sure that we can see that image in a view and show it on the screen so I can see if I've made any funny faces. Maybe I blinked in the middle of the photo. I want to make sure that the photo looks good before I save it to the Photos album. So now we're going to keep building with components. We're going to start by creating an instance of Swifty camera named camera. Now you may have gotten it very first try on that first page, and now you know how to create a camera from here on out. But if you need help, you can always tap on here and drag out this same line of code that we dragged out for the previous page. And remember, if you styled your camera and you want to have it show up as a kitty or a cloud or a shark, make sure that you change that parameter to one of those. And then if we scroll down, we're going to use a new component called image view. Now that doesn't take any parameters. So we're going to tap on it and hold. I'm going to drag it below let camera. In this playground, they're also teaching a little bit about organizing your code in lots of ways. So we're trying to keep all of our creating our components, our elements that are going to show up on the screen in the same place. And you'll notice that when we create a component, it's different than adding it to the screen. We could create a component and never add it to the screen, like when the very first time when we ran this playground. So let's go to the next page. Now it's all about adding components to the space. We have a note about the coordinate system again. We're going to add a Swifty camera to the space. So that's a fairly complex bit of code. I'm going to hit need help. Now I'm going to tap and hold and drag this one over. Now I say that's a fairly complex bit of code because we're doing a few things in here. All right, we read through it last time and we said space.add. There's our thing that we want to add, our camera, which is up here. At, and then we specify a point. We specify a size. You see, in this case, the point is at y negative 100. So do you know where that's going to show up on the screen? Feel free to answer it in the comments if you like. But it's going to show up below that midpoint. So that's for our camera. We've added the camera to the space. Now we have to add the image view to the space. And we're going to drag this over. So we're going to tap and drag over. If I drop it here, I'm going to have an error. So I've got my red dot showing up. And if I tap on it, we can see that consecutive statements on a line must be separated by a semicolon. Well, we could fix that, but I'm not a big fan of having everything on the same line. So let's do what we did last time. Let's hit the undo arrow. We're going to try to drag out below our other line where we added to the space. Now, this is something you can play around with. They've pre-calculated where they want to put it on the screen. You might want to say, well, let me run that and see where it shows up on the screen. Maybe I want to have my image view show up way up here in the corner, or my camera show right smack in the middle. Or maybe put my camera down in the middle and put the image put my camera down in the corner and put my image in the middle, because maybe that's the most important thing. And I want to make the image really large. This is where we start to put our own design stamp on things. And our app becomes our own, because no one's going to make the same exact layout as you necessarily. So let's run our code and we'll see if everything's hooked up. Okay, I see my camera and it is showing up lower than it was before. It's showing up in the plain style, but I don't see the image view. So let's figure out what happened there. So we're going to hit stop. Now we added it to the image view. If I were trying to debug this and figure out what went wrong, I would kind of read through the code and say, well, I have my space. I created a camera. I created an image view. I added the camera to the space, and that showed up. I saw that. I added the image view to the space. I might check to see the points and see if it's on screen. So you saw in that explanation that the grid is only so big. So maybe I had a number that's too large or too small, and it disappeared off the screen. But this looks like it's well within the parameters for being displayed. The size looks okay. But there's a little note here saying we won't be able to see the image view until we set its properties. Okay, all right, well, let's check that out. Let's turn the page. This tells us about properties. It's just like a property of, say, a bike. If you have a bike, some of the properties might be your bike is red. Your bike has 2 wheels. Your bike has a scratch on the handlebars. Those are some of the properties of your bike. Whereas the bike is more like something like an image view. So we have a few properties that we can change. We can see here. And in fact, there's a comment where we can set the properties of the image view. So we can set border color and width. Let's drag that one out. Tap and hold and drag out. We can set a placeholder photo. That's a kind of interesting one, so we'll drag that out too. You can see these are all lines of code. And the way we set properties on an instance of a type, now that is a mouthful. And by the time we get through this week, I think you'll have a better idea of what that means. We say this is the instance of the type, image view. We use a dot, and then we can pick the property name. So in fact, if I typed in image view, or I hit autocomplete for image view, one of my options for autocomplete is this dot. When I hit the dot, now in the autocomplete bar, I have all these really cool options like scale, size, rotation. So I can say, actually, let's do rotation. I'll tap on that. And now to set a property or to assign a value to it, like to say, if I wanted to set my bike's property to red, of color to red, I would do an equal sign. And now rotation takes a number. That's what a double is. So I'm going to just type maybe 5. So now let's try running that and see what it looks like. Okay, that's cool. So now I can see it. I can see that it's showing up on the screen. I just had to set a few properties. We can play around with these a little bit. I can tap on the image here, and it'll give me an image picker to use as a border. Or actually not to use as a border, sorry, to use as the image in the middle here while I'm waiting for the camera to take in a picture. So let's pick a picture of the Apple campus. Maybe we'll use the filled in one. Maybe there isn't one. Here we go. Here's the picture of the Apple campus. We'll use that as our placeholder. Let's see, what else will we change? We'll change the border color to purple, and let's hit run our code. Now we could spend ages working through our different properties on our image and making sure that our design is just fine-tuned. And hopefully you'll get to spend a fair bit of time playing with this on your own and make this app your own. So, okay, so now that we've set our properties, now what do we do? Let's go to the next page. We have a little quiz. So, which line of code adds an image view to the space? Is it this first one? Let image view equal image view? Is it this next one? Image view dot border width equals 15? Is it image view dot image equals, and then this picture? Or is it this last one where it says space dot add image view at a certain point at a certain size? Can you guess which one of those is the correct answer? And we've added the line over here, so we know at which point we added that image view to the space. Feel free to type your answer in the comments too. Have you got it? All right, well, let's say it's where we call this line. That's it. Great, so let's go on to the next page. We need to start our camera again. That's why there's no image showing up. So we're gonna go down here underneath the start the camera comment. And we're gonna do camera dot start. Now you see there's some other items here. We'll just hit start. And let's hit run our code. Okay, cool. So there's me again. I'm gonna go hit the shutter button. Great, okay, well, I can see the same behavior I saw before. The screen flashes. I can see a picture of myself here. We can flip the camera around and I can look at the desk, which isn't very exciting. But it's not showing up in my image view. So in Lights Camera Code, what we have to do is connect the image view to a certain property on our camera. So let's go take a look at how to do that. So now we're gonna swipe. And this is it. This is our first connection we're gonna make. This is a very big step. So to get them to talk to each other, we have these kind of cool diagrams. It shows us, if we tap on these little targets, what the different things are. This is our Swifty camera. If we tap on that, this is where we connect up to our image view. And you can see the line of code that we would use to connect our photo taken as a property on our camera. And it has this connect function we can call. And we connect it to the image view's input property. That is another huge mouthful. Now, it'll make a lot more sense if you've gone through something like Learn to Code 1 and maybe Learn to Code 2. But we can still take advantage of it and play around with this code because it's been written for us right here. So we can tap and hold on this and drag over to our code. I'm going to tap and hold, drag it over. Now we're going to run our code and see if we've successfully hooked up our shutter button and the photo that gets taken to our image view. So here we go. We're going to press on the shutter button. Great. Okay, now I can preview my image and say, maybe I don't want that one. Maybe I want to stop talking when I take my photo. Okay, I probably need to get my knuckle out of the way. And it works for the back camera as well. So not bad. We've just done a massive task. We've been able to use the camera on our iPad, both the front and the back cameras. We have a button hooked up that'll take the photo, and we've connected it to an image view so that the image that we take with our camera shows up on the screen. That's a huge task. And now if you keep going, you'll be able to save that photo to the Photos application on your iPad. So you'd be able to show off photos that you're able to take with your own camera in the native Photos app on the iPad. That's a pretty big deal, because then you can go add them to shared photo albums, decorate them a bit, edit them. That's a huge step. So this is a really big step in your coding career. This is a lot of code that we might not fully understand, but we can go through it and play with it and break it. If I go in here and I tap on this and I try to change it to, let's play around with, try adding the space to the space. We can play around with this and break it as much as we like. I got a message saying there's a problem starting this page, running this page. Start over. I can restart it. I can go use my undo button. That's super handy undo button. I can use the reset page if I ever get stuck. But this is a great place to experiment with the grid system. If you change the points, what's going to happen from, an X value of, say, minus 1,000? How can you practice putting the components in different areas of the screen? Can you change the size of your components by using this size with the width and height? There's a lot of aspects to Swift in this code that look enough like the English language that maybe you can kind of guess what they do. This is a huge leap. So if you feel a bit intimidated, I fully understand. This is a lot of code, but really what we're doing is just showing you that this is something you can play around with and experiment with, and you're starting to build your own apps, and you can think about, how is that app going to work? When someone goes and taps on the screen somewhere and taps on a button or wants to see an image that they've just taken, what is it going to look like to them? So great job.